By 11:30 that morning, I had been standing inside Heathrow Terminal 5 for nearly 4 hours. In my left hand, I was holding a small bunch of pale pink roses. In my right, my phone. Every few minutes, the arrivals board changed. A flight from Madrid landed, then one from Dubai, then another from Edinburgh. Passengers came through the sliding doors, pushing suitcases and looking tired, relieved, excited. Children ran towards grandparents, couples embraced, taxi drivers lifted cardboard signs above their heads. I watched every face. Laura was not among them. Her final WhatsApp message remained open on my screen. "Please don't leave. There's been another delay. I'm trying to sort it out." I read it again, though I already knew every word. This was supposed to be the day we finally met. I had left my bungalow in St. Albans before sunrise, wearing the navy jacket Anne once said made me look 10 years younger. I had polished my shoes, filled the car with petrol, and checked the route twice, even though I knew the M25 perfectly well. On the passenger seat, beneath a folded scarf, was a small wrapped box containing a silver bracelet. Nothing extravagant. Just something I thought Laura might wear and remember the day she came home. The flowers had looked fresh when I bought them. By midday, the petals were beginning to curl. I told myself not to worry. Flights were delayed all the time. Airports were complicated places. Paperwork abroad could be difficult. Laura had warned me there might be problems. Still, this was the third time I had expected her at Heathrow. The first time, a legal document had apparently been withheld. The second, her booking had been postponed. Now I was standing beneath the arrivals board again, surrounded by people whose loved ones actually appeared. My phone vibrated. For one foolish second, I thought she might be walking towards me. Instead, another message appeared. "Martin, I'm in terrible trouble." I stepped away from the crowd and read on. She claimed officials at the airport in Cyprus had refused to let her board. An emergency charge connected to her late husband's estate had not been cleared. Unless it was paid immediately, the property documents might be seized. She would miss the flight. She might lose everything. And, she wrote, she might never reach Britain at all. The amount was £18,500. I stared at the figure until the numbers seemed to lose their meaning. Then another message arrived. "Please help me. You're the only person I have." Those words reached me exactly where they were meant to. I placed the roses in a bin near the exit and walked back to the car without looking at anyone. The wrapped bracelet remained on the passenger seat. I drove away from Heathrow and stopped at a service station near the M25. Inside, people queued for coffee and breakfast rolls. A child complained about being hungry. Someone laughed beside the self-service machines. I sat alone at a small table near the window. My banking app was open. Laura's new transfer details were already copied into my phone. All I had to do was press a few buttons. Before I did, I remembered something my grandson Daniel had said. "Just check the photograph, Granddad." I had refused before. It had felt disloyal. Now, for reasons I still cannot fully explain, I opened a search engine and uploaded the picture Laura had sent me that morning. Within seconds, her smiling face appeared on my screen. Then again, and again. Only the names were different. The woman I loved was listed on a university website under another identity, in another country, living a life that had nothing to do with me. My fingers went cold. The sounds of the service station seemed to move further away. I looked at the photograph, then at Laura's final message. For nearly a year, I had believed I was helping a widow come home. Now one question pushed every other thought aside. Had Laura Bennett ever existed at all? 5 years before that morning at Heathrow, my life had become very quiet. Not dramatically quiet. There had been no great collapse, no moment when I stopped functioning. I still paid the bills on time. I kept the bungalow tidy. I remembered birthdays. I put the bins out on Wednesday evenings and checked the boiler before winter. From the outside, I was doing well. That was what made the loneliness difficult to explain. Anne and I had been married for 43 years. She died after an illness that lasted long enough for us both to understand what was coming, but not long enough to prepare for the silence afterwards. Even now, my body wakes at 6:15. For decades, that was when I rose for the early shift at Royal Mail. By the time I retired, the habit was too deeply set to disappear. I would get out of bed, pull on my dressing gown, and walk into the kitchen before the heating had properly warmed the floor. Quite often, I took 2 mugs from the cupboard. I never meant to. My hands simply remembered a life my mind had not yet caught up with. I would stand there holding them, feeling foolish, then place one carefully back. Anne's gardening gloves were still in the utility cupboard, green fabric, worn thin at the fingertips, and stiff with old soil. I had tried to throw them away once. They ended up back on the shelf before the rubbish was collected. Her handwriting remained in places around the house. A shopping list folded inside an old recipe book. A note beside the boiler reminding me which button to press. Her name written on the back of a photograph from Brighton. Small proofs that someone had once shared every room with me. The bungalow was warm, comfortable, and fully paid for. Anne and I had been careful with money all our lives. I had a pension, savings, and no debts. People often told me I was fortunate. They were right. But there were days when no one said my name. On Tuesday mornings, I volunteered at a charity shop near St. Peter's Street. I sorted donated books, tested old radios, and carried boxes for the manager. I liked being useful. Customers would ask where the changing room was or whether a lamp had been tested. For a few hours, I had answers people needed. Every Thursday, I went to the same supermarket. I usually bought too much milk and not enough fresh food. Cooking had once been something Anne and I decided together. What do you fancy tonight? I don't mind. You choose. Without that small conversation, dinner became toast, soup, or something heated in the microwave. In the afternoons, I watched quiz programs. I often answered questions aloud. Sometimes I turned towards Anne's chair before remembering it was empty. Graham Wilkes, my neighbor, occasionally persuaded me to walk to the local pub. He had lost his wife 2 years before Anne died. We understood one another well enough not to discuss it directly. We talked about football, electricity prices, and the council's refusal to repair the pavement. Neither of us ever said, "I hate going home to an empty house." We did not need to. Claire rang every Sunday evening. She lived in Reading with her husband and my grandson Daniel. She invited me for birthdays, Christmas, and the occasional Sunday lunch. I often declined. I told her the traffic was dreadful, or that I had things to do in the garden. The truth was more complicated. I did not want to sit in the middle of their busy household feeling as though everyone had adjusted their plans to include me. They never made me feel unwanted. I made myself feel unnecessary. Whenever Claire asked how I was coping, I gave the same answer. I'm perfectly all right, love. Privately, I wondered whether the useful part of my life had finished. I missed someone asking whether I had slept well. I missed hearing movement in another room. I missed making plans further ahead than Thursday's shopping. Most of all, I missed being noticed. That was when I began spending more time online. At first, it was harmless enough. Local history pages, photographs of old railway stations, groups where retired postal workers complained about how everything had changed. Then one evening, a Facebook advertisement appeared. British Companions Abroad. It described itself as an online community for widowed and divorced people over 60. I nearly scrolled past. Then I remembered something Claire had once said. Meeting someone new wouldn't mean you'd stopped loving Mum. I created a simple profile using a photograph taken at Daniel's birthday. 3 days later, a message appeared from a woman called Laura Bennett. She did not call me handsome. She did not flatter me. She asked about the old red postbox visible behind me in the photograph. I smiled before replying. At the time, I expected nothing more than a polite conversation. So why did that one harmless message begin to feel like the first open door in 5 silent years? Laura told me she was 64 and originally from Guildford. She had been living in Cyprus for several years with her husband, Richard, who had worked in property development. He had died suddenly 2 years earlier, she said, leaving behind a small villa, a jointly held account, and enough legal confusion to keep her trapped abroad far longer than she had ever intended. "I'm not staying because I want to," she wrote one evening. "I'm staying because every time I think it's nearly finished, another document appears." There was nothing extravagant about the way she told her story. She did not claim to own hotels or villas worth millions. She did not describe a glamorous life. She said she was tired. That made her believable. She also said she had no children and very little close family. A cousin in Surrey sent Christmas cards. An old school friend telephoned now and then. Most people, she said, assumed living beside the Mediterranean must be wonderful. They see sunshine, she told me. They don't see one plate on the table. I understood that immediately. Our early conversations were ordinary. That was what I liked about them. We discussed Sunday roasts and whether Yorkshire puddings belonged with every meat or only beef. We complained about British rain, even though she claimed to miss it. We talked about old detective programs and seaside holidays taken before airports became such exhausting places. She liked Foyle's War. I preferred Morse. Neither of us could understand why modern programs needed so much shouting. Sometimes we spoke about our marriages. Not often at first. She told me Richard had been difficult during his final year because he was frightened and refused to admit it. I told her. Anne had apologized for being ill, as though it were something she had chosen. Laura did not offer easy comfort. She simply said, "People often apologize when they're afraid of becoming a burden." That sentence stayed with me. She remembered details. When I mentioned Anne had loved daffodils, Laura sent me a photograph a few days later of yellow flowers growing beside a pale stone wall. When I had a dental appointment, she asked the following morning whether the numbness had worn off. When Claire canceled a visit because Daniel had a stomach bug, Laura stayed online with me through most of the evening. We spoke about very little. A burnt casserole, the weather in Hertfordshire, a stray cat that had begun appearing near her gate. Yet I went to bed feeling as though the day had been shared. After a fortnight, she began sending voice notes. The first one lasted less than 30 seconds. "Hello, Martin. I thought it might be nicer for you to hear me, rather than read another long message." Her voice sounded English, though I could not place the accent precisely. Sometimes there was a trace of Surrey in it. Sometimes there was a trace of Surrey in it. Sometimes there was a trace of Surrey in it. When I mentioned this, she laughed. Years abroad have ruined it. In the background, I could hear traffic, gulls, and the clatter of cups. The messages felt spontaneous. She laughed at my dry jokes and began calling me my steady man. I pretended not to like it. Secretly, I did. The real change came on the anniversary of Anne's death. I had not told Laura the date, but she remembered from something I had mentioned weeks earlier. Her message arrived just after 7 in the morning. "I won't ask if you're all right," she wrote. "I know you probably aren't." That evening, I told her more than I had intended. I admitted that I still left the radio playing in the hallway because silence followed me from room to room. She replied with a voice note. "I sleep with the television on. Not because I watch it, I just need another human voice in the house." For the first time, I did not feel embarrassed by the truth. Then she said something I have never forgotten. "You don't have to stop loving someone who died in order to care about someone still here." No compliment could have reached me more deeply. 6 weeks after her first message, Laura told me she hoped to return to Britain before Christmas. "If everything is finally signed," she said, "I could fly into Heathrow." I read the message twice. Then I typed, "I could meet you there." My face felt warm, which seemed ridiculous at 70. I told no one. That night, Laura sent me a photograph of herself standing beside a dark suitcase. She was smiling directly at the camera. I enlarged the picture and imagined seeing that same smile beyond the arrival's doors. At the time, I believed I was looking at the woman who might end my loneliness. I did not know I might also be looking at the first carefully prepared lie. By the time Laura and I had been speaking for 2 months, she had become part of the structure of my day. Her first message usually arrived before I was properly awake. "Good morning, my steady man. Did you sleep?" I would read it while sitting on the edge of the bed, listening to the heating click through the pipes. At 8 each evening, we spoke again. Sometimes for 20 minutes, sometimes for nearly 2 hours. I began cooking proper meals because Laura always asked what I had eaten. When I admitted that dinner had been 2 slices of toast and half a tin of soup, she said, "Martin, that is not a meal, that is surrender." The following evening, I made cottage pie. I even sent her a photograph. "Much better," she replied. "I'll make a respectable man of you yet." I laughed aloud in the kitchen. It had been a long time since anyone had teased me with affection. She persuaded me to buy a new shirt as well. "You cannot meet me at Heathrow, dressed as though you're about to prune a hedge. There's nothing wrong with my gardening clothes. There is, if you want me to recognize you." I chose a pale blue shirt from a shop in town, and felt oddly self-conscious carrying it home. Graham noticed the change before anyone else. We were trimming the hedge between our properties when he looked at me and said, "You've been smiling at that telephone a great deal lately." I told him about Laura. Not everything, just enough. He listened without interrupting, then rested both hands on the top of his ladder. "I'm pleased for you, mate." "Thank you. But meet her in person before you make any promises." "I intend to." He nodded. That was all. Laura never began by asking me for money. Instead, she asked for help. She sent formal emails connected to Richard's estate and asked whether the wording sounded right. I had dealt with enough contracts and complaints during my years at Royal Mail to understand official language reasonably well. "This paragraph seems deliberately confusing," I told her once. "That's what I thought," she replied. "I knew you'd make sense of it." Another time, she asked whether a British solicitor would use the phrase, "settlement authorization." Then she asked me to compare flights from Larnaca to Heathrow. They were small requests, practical ones. They made me feel needed. I had spent years believing that part of my life was over. Laura made me feel useful again without making it obvious that she was doing so. She also sent proof of the life she described, a photograph of a British passport, though her fingers covered most of the number, a screenshot of an airline booking, a letter bearing a solicitor's heading, pictures of a villa courtyard with pale stone walls and terracotta pots, cardboard boxes labeled for England, a silver locket containing what she said was Richard's photograph. Whenever I tried to enlarge the documents, the words became blurred. "Your telephone takes dreadful pictures," I joked. "My telephone is older than some governments," she replied. It all seemed just clear enough to reassure me. We began discussing what might happen when she returned. Nothing foolish. She did not suggest moving into my bungalow or marrying me within weeks. She said she would rent somewhere nearby at first. "We should learn whether we can stand each other in person," she said. We spoke about Brighton, Kew Gardens, and perhaps a quiet weekend in the Cotswolds once she had settled. I found myself imagining another cup beside mine at breakfast. One afternoon, I cleared a drawer in the spare bedroom. Then I stood looking at the empty space, felt ridiculous, and closed it again. There was still one thing that bothered me. We had never completed a proper video call. When I finally insisted, Laura agreed at once. The screen remained black when she answered. I could hear her voice, but the sound kept breaking apart. For a second, a blurred shape appeared, then froze. "Oh, for heaven's sake," she said. "This internet. Can you move nearer the router?" "I'm already beside it." The call ended. When I suggested trying again, her voice changed. Not angry, hurt. "I thought you trusted me." "I do. Then why does it feel as though I'm being examined?" I immediately apologized. By the end of the conversation, I felt ashamed for having raised the subject. A week later, She sent me flight details for a Saturday arrival. I told Claire that a friend was returning from abroad. What sort of friend? She asked. Just someone I know. The night before the flight, Laura rang in tears. A restriction had been placed on Richard's estate. The airline had postponed her booking until the matter was resolved. I sat in the conservatory and comforted her for nearly 2 hours. It's only temporary, she kept saying. I'll wait. You won't give up on me? No. After we ended the call, I looked at the unused airport directions on the table. Every step towards meeting Laura seemed to produce another reason she could not appear. Yet instead of asking why, I promised myself to be more patient. After the first failed flight, I began noticing details I had previously allowed to pass without question. None of them seemed important on their own. That was the trouble. Laura had once told me, Richard died in a private clinic outside Limassol. She described the polished floors, the air conditioning, and the doctor who would not meet her eyes. Several weeks later, while speaking about the paperwork surrounding his death, she mentioned identifying him at a government hospital. I noticed the difference immediately. I thought you said it was a private clinic, I said. There was a short pause. It was, she replied. They transferred him afterwards for official reasons. I probably explained it badly. Her answer arrived quickly enough to sound reasonable. I accepted it. Another evening, we were discussing Guildford, where she claimed to have grown up. During my delivery management years, I had covered that part of Surrey several times, and knew it better than she expected. I used to walk from the cathedral down Hawthorne Road, she said. I frowned. Do you mean North Street? No, Hawthorne Road. It runs just behind the cathedral. I was almost certain it did not. When I checked a map later, I found a road with a similar name several miles away. I told myself she had simply remembered incorrectly. After so many years abroad, street names could easily become muddled. Her calls began to feel more controlled as well. Laura rarely answered if I rang without warning. She preferred our conversations at 8 in the evening, and even then she sometimes delayed them by 10 or 15 minutes. If I tried unexpectedly, a message usually appeared. With the solicitor, at an official office, can't speak here. One afternoon, I called because I had received good news about a friend from the charity shop. Laura declined the call almost immediately. A minute later, she wrote that she was having tea at home and would ring later. When she eventually sent a voice note, I could hear many people speaking in the background. Cups clattered. A man laughed close to the microphone. That sounds busy, I said that evening. The neighbors have visitors, she replied. Sound carries terribly here. Again, it was possible. Everything was always possible. Her photographs troubled me in ways I could not quite explain. They were attractive, without appearing glamorous, but each one seemed carefully arranged. Laura beside a wall. Laura near a window. Laura standing with a suitcase. Never Laura, halfway through cooking. Never Laura with wet hair after rain. Never an unplanned picture of the sort Claire sent from family lunches, with someone blinking or a plate left untidily in the corner. There was no ordinary life surrounding her. When I searched for her social media account, I found almost nothing beyond the profile she used to contact me. I deleted everything after Richard died, she explained. I couldn't bear people looking at old photographs and asking questions. That answer made me feel cruel for wondering. The subject finally arose during lunch at Claire's house in Reading. I had checked my phone several times beneath the table. Laura had promised to confirm another flight that afternoon, and I was waiting for the message. Claire noticed. Someone important? She asked. I put the phone away. There's a woman I've been speaking to. Daniel looked up from his dinner. Claire smiled carefully. How long has this been going on? A few months? And she lives where? Cyprus at the moment. She's British. Claire's smile tightened. Have you met her? Not yet. Seen her properly on video? I felt my shoulders stiffen. We've had connection problems. Daniel asked if he could see a photograph. I hesitated, then handed him my phone. He studied Laura's face for several seconds. This looks professionally lit. It was taken by a friend at a hotel. Could be, he said. We could check where else it appears online. I took the phone back. No. Daniel blinked. I only meant an image search. It would feel like spying. Claire leaned towards me. Dad, intelligent people are manipulated every day. Being careful doesn't mean you're accusing her. I heard only one word. Manipulated. It made me feel old. Not elderly in years, but diminished. As though my daughter believed loneliness had removed my judgment along with my wife. I'm perfectly capable of managing my own affairs. I didn't say you weren't. You didn't need to. I left earlier than planned. On the drive back to St. Albans, Laura rang. She knew from my first answer that something was wrong. I told her what had happened. She did not insult Claire. She did not become defensive. She's frightened of losing you, Laura said softly. Perhaps she thinks another woman will change things between you. Her compassion disarmed me completely. Instead of questioning Laura, I felt guilty for being angry with my daughter. A week later, Laura sent a new Heathrow itinerary. I booked the airport parking and laid my navy jacket across the spare bed. Only hours before I was due to leave, she claimed another paperwork problem had stopped her traveling. This time, I entered the booking reference on the airline's website. It was not recognized. Laura said the ticket had been issued privately, through a group travel agent, and would not appear on the public system. I opened our conversation and typed, "Are you really coming?" For nearly a minute, I stared at the words. Then I deleted them. At the time, I told myself I was protecting Laura's feelings, but perhaps I was protecting myself from an answer I had already begun to fear. The first request for money came late on a Thursday evening. Laura and I had spoken earlier that day, and she had sounded tired but otherwise normal. She mentioned another appointment about Richard's estate, complained about the heat, and asked whether I had remembered to water the tomato plants. Nothing suggested a crisis. Then, shortly after 10, my phone rang. I almost did not answer because I was already in bed. When I heard her voice, I sat up immediately. She was crying, not loudly. Her breathing came in small, uneven bursts, as though she was trying very hard to remain composed. "What's happened?" I asked. "I'm sorry, Martin." "For what?" "I should never have involved you." "Involved me in what?" There was a pause. Then she explained that the Cypriot authorities had placed a temporary hold on Richard's estate account. An administrative tax had apparently been left unpaid, and until it was cleared, the documents she needed to return to Britain could not be released. "How much?" I asked. "I'm not asking you for anything. That wasn't my question." £2,750. The figure made me sit very still. Laura sent me a photograph of an official-looking notice. It carried a government emblem, reference numbers, and several paragraphs of formal language. I tried to enlarge the text. As usual, it blurred. "When can you access your own money?" I asked. "As soon as they unlock the estate account. It should only take a few days." "And there's nobody else you can ask?" She went quiet. Then she said, "I suppose I had started thinking of you as the only person I could turn to." I knew exactly what I should have said. I had always been careful with money. Anne and I had never borrowed unnecessarily. I had never acted as guarantor for anyone. I had spent years telling younger staff at Royal Mail not to mix friendship with finances. So I said, "Laura, I don't lend money to people I haven't met." There was no argument, no anger, only a long silence. "I understand," she said eventually. Her voice sounded smaller. "I'm sorry for putting you in this position. You haven't done anything wrong. I shouldn't have called." "I didn't say that. You've been very kind to me, Martin. I don't want money to spoil what we have." She wished me good night and ended the call before I could answer. I lay awake for nearly an hour. The more I thought about it, the worse I felt. Anne's final illness came back to me in fragments. Hospital corridors. Forms I did not understand. The helplessness of needing other people to explain what would happen next. Laura was alone in another country, surrounded by officials and documents, and I had responded with a rule. By midnight, I had convinced myself that caution was beginning to look like cruelty. The following morning, I rang my bank. I told myself it was not a gift. It was a short-term loan to someone who would repay it as soon as her account was released. Mrs. Patel, the senior advisor, asked me several questions. Have you met the recipient in person, Mr. Fletcher? Not yet. How long have you known her? A few months. And what is the purpose of the transfer? An administrative tax. She remained polite. I must advise you that overseas payments connected to estates can carry a high fraud risk. I understand. Would you like time to reconsider? No. The money left my savings account that afternoon. Laura's response was overwhelming. She sent several messages, then a voice note. I will never forget this, Martin. You don't need to make a fuss. You've saved everything. I've lent you some money. That's all. No, she said softly. You've proved I'm not alone. For the next few days, she was more affectionate than she had ever been. She called me darling for the first time. She said she had changed her emergency contact details and put my name down. That made the relationship feel official in a way I had not expected. Then, 1 week later, another problem appeared. A shipment containing Richard's property deeds had been moved to a bonded warehouse. Unless a release fee of £4,900 was paid, Laura claimed the documents could be seized. This time, I did not answer immediately. I thought the first payment settled everything. So did I. Why wasn't this mentioned before? They say the warehouse is separate from the estate office. I could hear myself becoming suspicious, and I disliked the sound of it. Laura sent another recording. A stern male voice spoke about deadlines, penalties, and legal forfeiture. The language sounded official enough. I can't lose those deeds, she said. If I do, Richard's entire estate may disappear. I don't have £5,000 sitting in my current account. I know. I'd have to move money. I'm not asking you to do that. But she was crying again. I transferred part of the amount after breaking into a fixed-term savings account and accepting a penalty. Afterwards, I felt relief rather than confidence. That should have warned me. Instead, I began hiding what I was doing. When Claire asked why I had visited the bank twice in 1 month, I told her I was comparing savings rates. The lie came surprisingly easily. By then, admitting concern would have meant admitting the first transfer might have been a mistake. A few days later, Laura sounded joyful. Everything was settled, she said. She had a confirmed flight to Heathrow. Then, on the morning she was due to leave, the final message arrived. An inheritance bond of £18,500 had to be paid before she could depart Cyprus. Once she reached Britain, she promised, she would repay all £26,150 I had advanced. She sent a photograph of herself sitting beside a suitcase, apparently waiting at the airport. I opened my banking app, entered the new recipient details, then stopped with my finger above the confirmation button. Was this the payment that would finally bring Laura home, or the one that would destroy the retirement Anne and I had spent a lifetime protecting? I did not press the confirmation button that morning, not because I had decided Laura was lying, because the bank had placed the transfer under review. A recorded message told me someone would telephone within 24 hours. I felt irritated more than relieved. Laura was supposedly waiting at an airport, and every delay made me imagine her stranded alone with a suitcase, watching the departure board while officials closed their offices around her. I left the phone on the kitchen table and went into the garden to clear my head. Claire arrived while I was cutting back the lavender. I had not expected her. She let herself in with the spare key and called through the bungalow, but I did not hear her over the electric trimmer. The bank rang the landline. By the time I came inside, Claire was standing beside the answering machine. A message had been left, asking me to confirm an international payment of £18,500. Her face had lost all color. "Dad, what is this?" I put the trimmer down. "It's private. £18,500 is not private when a bank is warning you." "They aren't warning me. They're checking the transfer." "To Laura?" I did not answer quickly enough. Claire covered her mouth for a moment, then said, "How much have you already sent?" I looked towards the garden. "Just over 7,000. Her voice rose. "You've given a woman you've never met £7,000? Lent. Dad, listen to yourself. I know exactly what I'm doing." "No, you don't. You're being scammed." The word struck harder coming from her than it had at lunch. "You've never spoken to her." "I don't need to. This is exactly what they do. She is trying to come home. She keeps saying she's coming, but she never arrives." "You think I haven't noticed that? Then why are you sending more?" "Because she needed me. Because without that payment, the months of waiting, the documents, the flights, and the promises might all have meant nothing." I could not say any of that without sounding as frightened as I felt. Instead, I said something cruel. "You've never liked the idea of anyone changing our family arrangements." Claire stared at me. "What arrangements?" "Christmas, visits, the bungalow. Perhaps you're worried Laura might become part of my life." Her eyes filled immediately. "You think this is about your house?" "I didn't say that. You didn't have to." She picked up her handbag, then stopped at the door. For a moment, I thought she was leaving. Instead, she turned back. "I'm sorry," I shouted. The apology unsettled me more than another argument would have. "I'm frightened, Dad, that's all." Daniel was waiting in her car. She called him inside. He sat opposite me at the kitchen table, quiet and uncomfortable. While Claire made tea, none of us drank. "Granddad," he said, "will you wait one day? Laura is at the airport. If she's real today, she'll still be real tomorrow." There was no accusation in his voice, only simple logic. I agreed to 24 hours. Claire suggested we ask Laura for proof that would take only minutes: a live video call, a photograph holding that day's newspaper, the complete flight booking, and the registered details of the solicitor handling the estate. When I put the request to Laura, her reaction was immediate. "So this is what your daughter thinks of me?" "She's worried. She's humiliating me." "Nobody is trying to humiliate you. You've trusted me for months, and now I must pose with a newspaper like a criminal?" Her voice trembled, but something was different. The emotion felt sharper, less like pain, more like panic. "Just turn on the camera," I said. "The connection won't support it." "Then send the solicitor's registration number." "Martin, are you allowing Claire to control our future?" For the first time, I nearly ended the call. That evening I went next door to see Graham. He listened while I explained everything, including the money. He did not shake his head or call me foolish. "My cousin lost a fair bit in an investment scheme," he said. He knew something was wrong, but embarrassment stopped him asking anyone. "I'm not embarrassed. Not yet, perhaps." He looked at me steadily. "The people who do this aren't cleverer than you. They just know where loneliness hurts." It was the first warning I could hear without feeling diminished. The following morning, Laura sent a message claiming she had boarded. Against Claire's advice, I drove to Heathrow. I told myself I needed to see the truth with my own eyes. Throughout the journey, Laura sent updates. The flight was delayed, then diverted, then held on the runway. At Terminal 5, no flight matching her details appeared on the board. I stood beneath it, holding pale pink roses, while real passengers came through the doors and fell into the arms of people waiting for them. After nearly 4 hours, Laura's final message arrived. She still needed £18,500. Immediately, I looked from the demand on my phone to the empty arrival's doors. Would I send the money to preserve the dream, or finally search for the truth? I left the terminal without the roses. By the time I reached the car, the wrapped bracelet on the passenger seat looked like something belonging to another man. I drove for several miles before pulling into a service station near the M25. My hands were too unsteady to continue. Inside, everything carried on as normal. People queued for coffee. A family argued over where to sit. Someone dragged a suitcase across the tiled floor. I chose a table by the window and opened Laura's photograph on my phone. Daniel's suggestion returned to me. We could check where else it appears online. For months, I had refused because it felt disloyal. Now I uploaded the image. The results appeared almost immediately. Laura's face was on a university website. Not Laura Bennett. Dr. Helena Morris. A British-Australian nutrition lecturer. There were photographs of her speaking at conferences, standing beside students, and appearing in public health articles. The same smile. The same silver blonde hair. The same woman I had imagined walking through the Heathrow arrivals doors. My hands went cold. I read the university page several times, hoping I had misunderstood it. Then I found another result. A fraud warning forum. The photograph had been used under different names. Susan, Margaret, Elaine. Each story involved a widow abroad, frozen accounts and urgent requests for money. The noise around me seemed to move further away. It felt less like discovering a lie than suffering another bereavement. Only this time, there had been no real person to lose. I rang Claire. She answered immediately. "Dad? I found her." There was a pause. "What do you mean?" "The photograph. It belongs to someone else." Claire did not say she had warned me. She only said, "Stay where you are. I'm coming." While I waited, I kept searching. The solicitor's company Laura had named did not appear on the official register. The villa courtyard came from a holiday rental website. The supposed government notice contained spelling errors and uneven formatting. The airline itinerary used the wrong logo for the date shown. Every piece of proof I had accepted began collapsing within minutes. Claire arrived with Daniel. He sat beside me and examined the photographs without making me feel foolish. Some of the image files, he explained, had been downloaded years earlier. One had been edited before Laura ever contacted me. Claire emailed the university's public office. The reply came later that afternoon. Dr. Helena Morris had no connection to Cyprus, Richard Bennett, or me. I called Laura without warning. For once, someone answered immediately. A man's voice said, "Hello?" Then the line disconnected. Seconds later, Laura sent a message. "That was a customs officer. Why are you calling when I told you not to?" I rang again. She answered this time. Her voice was familiar, but something in it had changed. "Turn on the camera," I said. "Not now." "Do it." "Martin, I'm surrounded by officials." "Then tell me my full address." She hesitated. I had never given her the house number, only the town. "Why are you asking strange questions?" "Because I found the woman in your photographs." Silence. "Her name is Helena Morris." When Laura spoke again, the warmth had vanished. "Someone must have stolen my identity." "No, you stole hers. You don't understand what's happening." "I understand enough. If you involve the police, the estate will be frozen permanently. You'll lose everything you've already sent." It was the first time she sounded openly threatening. Not frightened, not heartbroken. Angry that I had stopped obeying. I ended the call. Then I sat there looking at months of messages. My grief over Anne. My fear of being unnecessary. My arguments with Claire. My savings. My habits. My loneliness. I had offered all of it willingly, believing I was being known. In truth, it had been collected and used. Later, the police explained that Laura was probably not one person at all. Different people may have written the messages, prepared the documents, handled the payments, and made the calls. The gentle voice I associated with her may have belonged to someone hired only to send recordings. There had never been a widow waiting to return home. Only a system designed to keep me hoping. The final £18,500 had not left my account, but more than 7,000 already had. As Claire drove me back to St. Albans, I could not look at her. Stopping the final transfer should have felt like relief. Instead, one question remained. Could I face my family and the authorities without allowing the scammers to take the last thing I still possessed, my dignity? The following morning, Claire came with me to the bank. I had not slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the arrivals board at Heathrow and Laura's photograph beside another woman's name. Mrs. Aisha Patel met us in a private room at the back of the branch. She was the same advisor who had questioned my first transfer months earlier. I expected disapproval. Instead, she closed the door, offered us tea, and spoke to me exactly as she always had. "Mr. Fletcher, I'm very sorry this has happened." I kept my eyes on the table. "I should have listened to you. This is not the time to blame yourself." She explained that the final payment had been flagged because the beneficiary details were different from the earlier transfers. The amount was larger, and the pattern matched known romance fraud cases. "The £18,500 never left your account," she said. Relief came so suddenly that I almost felt ashamed of it. Then she added, "We are also trying to recall the earlier payments." "How much can you recover?" "I can't promise anything." The money had been moved through several accounts. One transfer was still sitting with an intermediary bank and could be frozen. Another had already been withdrawn or sent abroad. For the next several days, I kept my phone nearby, waiting for updates. Eventually, Mrs. Patel called. They had recovered just over £3,100. The rest was gone. I thanked her. After the call, I sat alone in the kitchen and looked at the figures in my savings account. Anne and I had spent years building that money. We had gone without expensive holidays, kept cars longer than most people, and paid bills before buying anything for ourselves. Losing nearly £4,000 hurt, but knowing I had almost lost another $18,500 hurt differently. It showed me how close I had come to destroying the security we had built together. Claire drove me to the police station later that week. I gave a full statement. Phone numbers, WhatsApp conversations, voice recordings, bank details, email addresses, fake letters, photographs, every message Laura had sent while pretending to be trapped at an airport. The officer also helped me report the case to Action Fraud. At first, answering their questions felt unbearable. How did contact begin? When did affection develop? When was money first requested? Each answer forced me to hear the pattern aloud. What I had believed was a relationship became a list of techniques. The investigators told me the same photograph had been used under several identities in reports from across Britain. An elderly widower in Kent had been asked to pay medical fees. A woman in Yorkshire believed she was helping someone release an inheritance. Another victim had been promised a meeting at Manchester Airport. Different stories. The same structure. The same stolen face. For several weeks, I wanted nobody outside the family to know. Then a local support group for older residents asked whether I would speak anonymously about what had happened. I nearly refused. Graham persuaded me to go. "You've nothing to be ashamed of," he said. "It doesn't feel that way. That's why they get away with it." At the meeting, I sat behind a small table in a community hall and spoke to 12 people over tea and biscuits. I told them I had considered myself careful. I explained that Laura had not begun with money. She had begun by remembering my dental appointment, by asking what I had eaten, by making me feel useful. When I finished, a woman at the back raised her hand. She had been preparing to send £30,000 to a man claiming to be an offshore engineer. The next morning, she contacted her bank and the police instead. That was when something shifted inside me. I could not recover every pound, but I might stop someone else losing far more. A few months later, I agreed to speak on regional radio using my real first name and voice. I said that shame was the fraudster's final weapon. After the interview, several listeners reported similar relationships. Then the police rang. 2 people in Britain who had allowed their accounts to be used as money mules had been arrested. The main organizers were still believed to be abroad. No dramatic ending. No mastermind led into court. Just part of the chain broken. For a long time, that felt incomplete. Then I understood that justice is not always about seeing every guilty person punished. Sometimes it means protecting the next victim. Sometimes it means refusing to disappear in silence. Even so, each morning I still woke expecting Laura's message. "Good morning, my steady man." How do you mourn someone who never existed, when the feelings they awakened were real to you? The apology to Claire came on a Sunday afternoon. She had brought Daniel over for lunch, and we were sitting in the conservatory while rain tapped lightly against the glass. For several minutes I said nothing. Then I looked at her and admitted what had been troubling me most. "I accused you of wanting to control me." Claire lowered her cup. "I know. I said things about the bungalow, about family arrangements. None of it was fair." She looked towards the garden before answering. "I was frightened, Dad." "That doesn't excuse what I said." "No, but I didn't handle it well either." She gave a small, tired smile. "I spoke to you like you were a child who'd done something wrong. You're my father. I should have remembered that." It was the first honest conversation we had managed since Laura entered my life. We agreed on something simple. Concern must never become humiliation. If Claire was worried, she would tell me plainly but respectfully. If I felt judged, I would not shut her out or hide things to protect my pride. Daniel helped me secure my accounts. He changed passwords, activated extra verification, and showed me how to check photographs before accepting what they appeared to show. "Do you want me to delete the companionship group?" he asked. I considered it. "No." He looked surprised. "I'm not letting them take that as well. The scammers had already taken money, confidence, and months of my life. I refused to let them turn caution into permanent fear. I did not go searching for another relationship. Not then. Instead, I began volunteering twice a week at a community center in St. Albans. At first, I helped set out chairs and carry tea trays. Later, I began organizing the Tuesday morning gatherings for widowed and retired residents. There was nothing grand about them. Tea, biscuits, a quiz, occasional talks about pensions, online safety, or local services. Yet I began to notice how many people lingered after the official session ended. They did not need another activity. They needed someone to notice they had arrived. I understood that. Some evenings, I still returned to the bungalow and felt the quiet waiting for me. Anne's gloves remained in the utility cupboard. Her shopping list stayed inside the recipe book. But the silence no longer felt like proof that my life had finished. I was useful again. Not because someone abroad claimed to need rescuing, because real people sat across from me and asked whether I would pour another cup of tea. 1 year after the morning at Heathrow, I drove back to Terminal 5. This time, there were no roses on the passenger seat, no silver bracelet, no banking details open on my phone. Claire and Daniel were returning from a short holiday, and I had offered to collect them. Standing near arrivals brought everything back. The changing board, the sliding doors, the families searching the crowd. For a moment, I could almost see myself holding those fading flowers, determined to believe one more excuse. Then Daniel appeared. The moment he saw me, he lifted both arms above his head and grinned. Claire followed behind him, pulling a suitcase. When she reached me, she embraced me for longer than usual. "You all right?" she asked. "Yes," I said. And this time, I was. The woman in those messages never existed, but the loneliness she found was real. For months, I believed admitting that loneliness made me weak. Now I understand that hiding it was what placed me in danger. There is nothing shameful about wanting companionship. Nothing foolish about missing the sound of another person in the house. But affection should survive ordinary questions. Real people can meet you. Real relationships do not require secrecy, forged documents, or repeated emergencies. I kept one printed photograph of the woman I had known as Laura. For a while, it remained in the drawer beside my bank statements, not as a memory of love, as a reminder to verify before trusting. Eventually, I placed it inside the police file, closed the folder, and pushed the drawer shut. As Claire and Daniel loaded their cases into the car, I looked towards the passenger seat where the roses had once rested. Then a thought came to me. How many people were still waiting at an airport, a railway station, or beside a silent telephone for someone who was never coming?